Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. I am by myself in the studio. My co-hosts, who knows where they are, but here we are. My guest tonight is Mike Carriveau, who I think I've known for a long time.
Yes, we do have an association all the way back to the Department of Motor Vehicles.
There you go. My history keeps catching up with me. Mike is here to talk about a very interesting topic, and a very sad one, actually, if I may use that word. It's about timber thefts. Mike, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. So why don't you just start off by letting people know a little bit about you and your background.
Okay, well, I was born in Montpelier, Vermont. I lived here most of my life, except the 4 years that I was in the Navy. When I got out of the Navy, my father and I jointly opened Carrieveau's Golf on Berlin Street, which we ran together for years until he retired, along with my mother. And from then on, I ran the station myself with the help of good friends. And I recently retired in 2012, and since such time, I've been busy doing different things for the community and teaching martial arts and hunting and just enjoying life.
Great. And I know, because we're Facebook buddies, but you're really into the martial arts. You teach it too, right? And
I do.
Yeah.
I've been in that since 1971.
That's great. Good deal. I should try that a little. I just yell. Help. Anyway, Mike approached me maybe about a week ago, I think, and he was explaining to me an issue that's out there that he's been working on for years, it sounds like. And he wants to work with our legislature to ensure that our laws provide maximum protection for landowners when they invite folks to come in and clear their land. And it's quite an interesting story. So I'm going to let Mike explain it to us. Could you explain the issue to our viewers and what you're trying to do about it?
Gladly. I didn't have any inkling or any notion of what the logging industry was other than seeing the big trucks pass by my house and down the highways. And I became acquainted due to the sheer association of my neighbors having their property logged. And in the consequence of doing that, I decided to join in the other two adjoining lots and have my property logged as well. In the process of doing that, certain situations came to bear that I realized that things weren't as they were supposed to be. The contract that we had signed wasn't being fulfilled to the extent that it was supposed to be, and due to the fact that there were certain promises made, and then one day I hear a large noise, and I look out and the loggers are leaving all three of our properties to go to someone else without full payment or restitution. To the three of us, I had to take action. I contacted the Vermont State Police, who referred me to the CAP program through the Attorney General's office.
Which is, I want to stop you, CAP is Consumer Advocacy Protection, or?
I think it's
Consumer Assistance Program.
Project,
oh, okay. Thank you very much.
That.
Thank you.
Well, anyway, when I went and talked to these people, I expressed my concern that I didn't want to waste my time with these people, and they assured me that they wouldn't. They told me that a big part of their collection was done and it was solved through the Attorney General's office. Well, that never came to fruition, and after 2 months, we ended up going to court, which I asked them if I could have just gone to court in the first place. And they said, no, protocols kind of says that you should go through our office first, which was a fallacy in itself. We went to court, and in the process of going to court, I had no evidence to delineate the amount of logs that were taken from my property. As a consequence, I found out through a conversation that they had gone to one logging mill in Bath, New Hampshire. And in the process of going there, I found out that they had other mills that they had gone to. One was back in Vermont, one was in Maine, and, excuse me, let me back up on that. I did not find that out at that time. I only knew the first 2 original mills. And talking to those mills, telling them what I want, they contacted the loggers that had left my property, and they denied me access to what they call a mill slip, which is something the mill fills out, which lists the specifics of the logs that were brought to them for, as a result of harvesting on your property, and obviously you would get a monetary part of the logs that were brought there. Well, anyway, the owners, the loggers denied me access to the mill slips, so we had to go back to court, get subpoenas, and go back to the mills. And in the process of doing that, we found out that there was 2 more mills that were involved with the forest products that came from my property. And then, you know, we had to go back to the court to get 2 more subpoenas so that we could actually get the information from the other 2 mills. And all the time trying to do this before our scheduled court hearing. So the story just compounds on itself on that, because as we went to court, we found out how flawed a system it actually is. Because we were passed from one entity to the other, and each of those entities all said the same thing. You probably won't get any restitution for what you've said as far as a monetary amount, and chances are there will be no legal or criminal action taken against these perpetrators. And if there was, in following up on that through discovery, we found out that there was a number of default judgments that had been levied against these people, and most of the people, some of them did get partial payments, or they didn't get any payment at all. So they had a history of not providing relief to the people that they didn't honor the contract.
Right.
And since such time, in the process of finding that out, I went and talked to different people, and as a consequence, I made a list up of 20 different names of people that also had had problems with this group of loggers, and it wasn't necessarily all in the logging industry per se. It could have been subcontractors, it could have been a landlord, it could have been a parts supply person,
Right.
or it could be something else. But I came up with 20 names, 20 entities. Some of them were business, some were private individuals. But we all had the same problem.
And it sounds like in Vermont that the laws only are sort of, everybody knows you have 40 feet. Is it 40, what is the limit of how much you can, 40 acres that you can log. And that's where the enforcement laws are focused on, the 40 acres or more, correct? That we're pretty weak when it comes to the kind of logging you're talking about.
True. Through trying to get this resolved so that nobody in the future would be taken advantage of and become a victim, another victim for these people, I decided to champion all of our cause to try to get some relief from these nefarious actors. And in the process of doing that, I'm basically representing these people now, and I'm trying to get action taken so that they're either compensated for or new laws are enacted that protect the citizens of Vermont. And one of the things that was a problem was the state of Vermont, a few years ago, an individual, and I'm trying not to use names, contacted his legislators and went to court and brought up the issue of non-payment. And he had the same problem, that there were no mill slips or trip tickets, which designate which products are taken and what those products are and the value of the products. So he went there and he tried to propose legislation that these new bill would include mill slips and trip tickets. But because of the lobbying industry for the different forest products groups that are in Vermont, that was shelved because they felt it would be an infringement, slowing down the installation, not the installation, but the starting of logging on a particular site, plus the excessive paperwork that would be encompassed, and it might put loggers out of the business. Now, I can appreciate that, but you got to think of it this way, and you, Pat, would know this better than anyone else. When I applied as a Gulf Station owner and wanting to be a used car dealer, I was told I would have to be insured and bonded to start to be a used car dealer. And I also, the same thing for being an inspection officer. Well, the thing about it was, when I was told that, I was initially told that I would be interviewed X amount of time down the road, which was 3.5 months later, and then I was denied. And as you know, Pat, I got that law changed.
Yes, you did. I remember that.
So what I'm trying to say, if I circle the wagons back, was if it was such an inhibition to protect the citizens of Vermont, then why was I forced to do all these flagrant excesses, as far as I'm concerned, which was to protect the citizens of Vermont? Why can't you juxtapose and compare these two side by side? I'm trying to tell you that this taking is going on as we speak, and I tried to stop this about a year ago so that no one else would become victimized as a consequence of inaction on the part of the bureaucracy that's supposed to be protecting the citizens of Vermont, which they are clearly not doing. They've had over a year to take and address this issue, to take me in to listen to me, and I got to admit there are a number of different senators and representatives and commissioners in both Forest and Parks and Recreation and
Fish and Wildlife or
Environmental Conservation. Actually, I didn't get to talk to that commissioner, but I did talk to Kim Greenwood, who was quite helpful. Michael Snyder was extremely helpful as well as Sam Lincoln. And they agreed, in fact, everyone I've talked to in the bureaucracy agrees that something needs to be done. It warrants it, but nothing has been done.
And I just, as what Mike is saying, Gary Kessler, who was the chief of the Vermont Department's Enforcement Division, wrote, it was a huge article about this very issue. And if you wanted to kind of research this on your own, we looked it up in the Northlands. Do you have that?
Northern Woodlands.
Northern Woodlands. Just put it in your computer, and you'll see a whole bunch of articles under that site, and you'll look for the article that talks about timber thefts. And Gary Kessler, who's from Vermont and former chief, just lays it all out. And it's a great article, really opens your eyes.
Yes, that was written in 2014.
Oh, really?
He was the chief enforcement officer for environmental conservation.
Yep.
And he was quite upset that nothing was being done. In fact, he mentioned the fact that he couldn't get a prosecutor to criminally charge these people. Huh. And they did it. They said that most of them were hiding behind a contract. It was just a breach of contract. Well, he felt, as the enforcement officer, it was much more than that. And I'm of the same mindset that they can hide behind the contract that they had, but they've gone without, the perpetrators have gone out beyond the scope of a contract. And one such case on that was a person that lived in East Montpelier, who had the loggers come in and do her property, and there was 75 acres. And the property was first checked by a forester who marked all the trees with the proper paint so that there'd be no question. And the sad part about that was when the property was actually logged, they took so many trees off that property that it bounced them out of a forest management program, and they were no longer eligible. They had to go back in and plant new trees to be able to still stay in that program.
Wow.
Now, the lady that owned the property, her husband was dying at the time, and she was unable to be on that property because the house was being built there, where they were going to move together to this new site, so they had no idea what was happening on that property. She went to court. She won, I believe, by a default judgment for $80,000. They said it was such an egregious taking that they give her treble damages for it, and to this day she has not received a cent.
Well,
and that was in 2015.
You told me, and that a lot of times these contractors will put all the equipment and all the assets that they have in somebody else's name, their wife, or which gets them off the hook when they go to court.
Yes, and Gary Kessler brought that up when they were trying to prosecute, that they couldn't garnish their taxes. Products or property, such as you're saying, was put in two people's names, the other person being a supposed innocent victim. Right. And the houses that most of them lived in are below the minimum, so that they can't be attached. And there's a certain things that you can legally attach and certain things that you can't. And they have managed to escape paying back the amount of wood products that they should have gotten from their problem. Now, a lot of people say, like on this person, it was $240,000, the award, that she was promised $80,000. Well, excuse me, she wasn't. She was promised to be paid for the products that came off the property, and it was supposed to be around $80,000, which the forester reinforced. But you got to take into account that theft wasn't $80,000. That theft in the logging industry, what generally happens is $80,000 usually only represents the logger. Another third of that is the transporter, and then the other third is the mill.
Right.
So it was actually a theft of $240,000. So even though she was awarded treble damages, that was the value of the products anyway.
Right. Wow. I thought for a long time now that there's the mills. They're not in Vermont anymore, are they? They're out of state.
There are still mills in Vermont. Chapeau has a couple different ones in Vermont. Ken Davis has one in Hardwick. There's numerous other.
Are there? Because I don't remember why I remember
Stan
this.
Robinson and Sons has one down in Passumpsic.
Huh. Well, I'd heard that a lot of them had closed and it caused some problems that they have to go over to Maine or New Hampshire.
Well, you know, it's like everybody. Everybody's going to shop for the place that has the best value. But then you get a longer haul to bring them to the mill.
Right. The cost of transportation.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot that's behind the scenes on that people don't know. Like if you bring your logs to a certain mill, that doesn't mean that that product's only going to go to that one mill and you're going to receive mill slips from that one place. One of the mills we brought them to did not provide us with mill slips. They said that they didn't have to. But when you bring them out of state, they require them. But we weren't known, it wasn't known to us at that particular time, but through discovery that they had gone to mills that were out of state.
Right.
We'd have never known that.
Wow. Well, and I know we've talked before, and when I read the article in the Northland thing, New Hampshire and Maine have really tightened up their laws, more so by a long shot than Vermont and, surprisingly, New York, which I would think they've got so many
I think as far as jurisdiction and enforcement, it goes, I believe, Maine, New Hampshire, New York, Vermont. Vermont has the least, or shall we, the most lax laws in all four of those states, and the least amount of enforcement. Everybody professes to want to enforce the division. I've contacted the Attorney General's office numerous times, and I found out that Mike Snyder, the Commissioner of Forest Parks, has personally talked to T.J. Donovan concerning this issue, and he's has to be cognizant of this, but I don't get replies on the emails that I've sent him, and I've tried to impress upon him that this taking can go on and on and on, especially since this has dragged out a year, that they're not protecting the citizens of Vermont. He purports to protect the citizens of Vermont in all his press releases, his things on the media and whatnot, but here is something that's been going on for 15, 20 years, and he has not protected the citizens of Vermont. Neither did his former administrations. But that currently sits in his domain.
Right.
He is the one now that's negligent. He knows this is going on. It's been brought to his attention, yet I'm not receiving feedback from him. I'm not hearing about any proposals, and that's why I've come up with proposals myself.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, because you've got some recommendations for the legislature, correct?
I do.
Do you want to go through those? And maybe not everyone, because we have time constraints here. But
Yep. What I'm proposing is loggers will be required to file with the Secretary of State their trade name. Currently, that's a requirement, but the Secretary of State's office does not enforce the fact that they're not complying with that registry. Bonding for all loggers, logged in a new state website created especially for the logging industry, and certificates of insurance for both business liability and workman's comp. Proof provided annually will be posted on the new state website. Anybody can go to that website and see just exactly if there's people that come into their property, are bonded, and if they are insured in both ways, either through the business itself or for workman's comp.
now, because is that not partly the Department of Labor should be involved in this? Because liability and workers' comp is right out of the Department of Labor.
They have made a notice on WCAX a while ago. He was stating the fact that he had helped ensure the loggers get workman's comp and whatnot. Well, that's fine. And I appreciate the loggers because I know a lot of great loggers, and I really respect the hardworking individuals that they are. They're out there in the worst of conditions, the most dangerous of conditions, trying to provide products to the industry and a good life for themselves. The only problem is these nefarious loggers, these bad actors, are taking advantage of the loggers and giving them a bad name for their actions.
Right. Is there a logging association?
There are a number of different. Vermont Forest Products Association is one.
Because that's Ed Larson,
the other
right?
is a Vermont Family Forest. Those are only two that I know of. Great, great people. Outstanding individuals representing a lot of individuals, loggers, some of them in mills. I believe they're highly reputable. The ones I've talked to have been extremely
Well, I was going to say,
helpful.
both of them, I think it's Ed Larson and...
Ed Larson is a lobbyist for the Vermont Forest Products Association.
Right, and the other association, they are well respected up at the legislature, and I would see them, getting involved with this discussion.
Well, they have the Vermont Forest Products Association. At the meeting that I went to, and I was invited to speak, everyone was extremely receptive to what I had to say about what had been taking place in the logging industry and supported me in my endeavors to help straighten this out. In fact, Sam Lincoln was at this particular meeting, and he himself came up to me and said that he felt that what I was doing was a noteworthy ambition.
Great.
And that he would try to support me, and if I could contact him and come in and talk to him, he'd be very receptive to helping me with this issue.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because they are really well respected up at the legislature.
He is an outstanding man, and I had a meeting set up once with Mike Snyder and Sam Lincoln and Dave Wilcox. And they, at that meeting, I kind of jumped in with them that they had allowed this to go on, and that's when they explained to me that they are not the enforcement division. They provide information to the entities that are the enforcement division, who it's their responsibility to enforce the laws, and that all they are is an information provider.
Right.
But
that's
he was
to the environmental section within
Yes, the
ANR.
environmental conservation is the legal arm for the natural resources division. And in that discovery, I found out that, and this coincides with what I'm going to be talking about here, is they used to, the forest wardens themselves used to go out to these different loggers' sites and tell them that they were in violation of certain AMP, accepted management practices, which is water quality regulations for the state of Vermont. In the process of doing that, they found out that they were actually fearing for their life. They were threatened by the loggers that were up north, not only at the logging location, but at home. Consequently, they moved to the sheriff's department to have them to do this. And Gary Kessler reinforced this thing too, that the sheriffs backed out as well, would not go to serve those people. They finally had to have the game wardens and the Vermont State Police go and serve these people. For fear, and then come to find out, I guess these people had different assaults, domestic as well as on landowners too. So,
must have been at it a while, right?
Yes, and they are still continuing. A few months or a few years ago, they were noted to be in Essex, and it was on TV that they had taken advantage of another Vermont citizen.
Wow. So you had mentioned a little while ago, and we didn't really highlight it. You said a new state website. What you're proposing is that the state develop a new,
exactly.
And that would probably be out of the way of the Secretary of State's or the Environmental Conservation.
Well, I figured it was in Forest Parks. I don't know who it is, but whoever does it, they have to understand that there's a need for it. Because if you don't have a mill slip and you don't have a trip ticket, you're not provided with those, and you go to court, you have no evidence to substantiate what products were brought to the mill from your property. And like the ones that we were provided for, did not say my name. They just said Plainfield. And it was the same thing for the two adjoining properties, although one of them did have their name on it, I do believe. But when it came to court, when the judge was trying to find for evidence, the mill slips said Plainfield. They did not designate my name or my two neighbors' names.
So I'm assuming somewhere in this recommendation, you're going to be recommending that the mill slips be complete and be mandatory to give to you, the landowner, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is I wanted on this thing to have it written online if these particular people had any felonies and or convictions,
right,
to be posted on this website as well. And there needs to be, as I said, a fundamental change in the sharing of information between truckers, loggers, mill operators, and landowners.
Right.
All are equal shareholders in any particular logging operation. The amount of loggers paid can remain confidential, but a summary of products harvested needs to be made accessible to the landowners. I propose a state-sponsored website to ensure clarity for all the above. Now, the mill slips and trick tickets will be mandatory and provided to landowners upon request or when the job is completed or as agreed upon. No subpoena will be required to obtain this information.
Right. I'm surprised you would want to get that, and why they said no, they didn't have to, or why didn't they give it to you, I guess?
The mill operators said that the confidentiality agreements, as far as they were concerned, was what restrained them from providing me with that information. But if you think about it, they only own a third of what was happening here.
Right.
It's divided between the loggers, the transport, and a fourth, if you look at it.
I can't imagine that's confidential.
Yeah, that's as much my information as it is any of the others.
Yeah.
And then the court will provide the Department of Forest Parks with information concerning judgments and convictions and place this information on the new website disclosing court actions. Also on this site, loggers will provide on a daily basis a list of all wood products harvested, number of loads, to which mills the products were taken. The information will be posted daily on the state website for landowner access. Trip tickets and mill slips will include date and time of departure, trip tickets only, landowner's name and location, logger's name, transporter's name, mill to which products were taken, time and date received, a product breakdown, and a further description if the load is split and goes to other mills.
Just curious, what's your estimate of the size of this problem? Do you know how many landowners log their land? Do we have a number of how many? I don't know if you do, and if you don't, that's fine, because I sort of threw that question out there. But how big is this problem?
Okay. You figure this problem's been going on for 15, 20 years. You take that one lady alone, that was $240,000.
Right.
That isn't cheap.
No.
And a number of other people have, I don't know the particular values, but a lot of them tell me they had no idea, because let's say one place I remember was, it was paid for 14 loads of logs, but the other 14 loads of logs he never got anything for.
And I'm sure older people are looking at that forest as, money in the bank. That may be their retirement money to log the land and live comfortably thereafter.
One of the loggers, or Dave Kessler, I forget, Gary Kessler, was telling me what they do lots of times is they research the town records to see a particular parcel that they think looks like it might be a real big monetary benefit.
Yeah.
They go there, they research the land records, see who owns the property, whether they live there or whether they live out of state.
Yeah, second home thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not saying these two particular people that I'm talking about have, but that a lot do, and it could be these two.
Yeah.
An interesting thing that you brought back up is the state of Vermont, with this one logging company up north, levied fines of $41,000 on them for violations of the AMP, the Accepted Management Practices, which the state regulates. They have failed to pay that any of.
Wow.
The ones in central Vermont were levied fines of $13,000 and $21,000. They have failed to pay on either of those two. They have put that particular one in the hands of a collection agency, have not received a cent from them. So the state of Vermont has received my list and numerous officials
Right.
in the state of Vermont and the Attorney General's office are cognizant of this taking that has been going on for a number of years and have taken minimal measures to protect the citizens of Vermont.
So I would assume if I wanted to be a logger, there must be some kind of some process that I go through to be certified as a logger in Vermont, or can you just say, poof, I'm a logger?
Well, you know, if I'm not sure of that. All I know is the registry of the one that's in central Vermont is not registered with the Secretary of State as a legitimate
'Cause
business.
it would seem to me that they would want these people to sign off on this management practices, that they'll follow the management practices, that they'll do X, Y, and Z, so that if they don't, that their certificate could be pulled and they couldn't log anymore.
That's how it should be.
Yeah, oh, okay.
That is how it should be, and that's what I'm proposing.
Yeah, that just
There's
makes
no
sense.
criminal action taken in this state. It's a case of,
Yeah, right.
and yet the victimization is a pattern and practices example of them moving from one person to the next, knowing that they are not going to pay that next person. They're going to, and if they do pay anything, it'll come from the person from before.
Wow.
And they know that if they go to court, they either won't show up for court, they will go to court, they'll make a partial payment on that, and then the whole situation has to start again. The only one bearing the blunt of this is the innocent landowner who has to pay for the lawyer, the subpoenas, all the traveling, the
Right.
court appearances.
Sure.
And he's further punished as a consequence of the state's inaction to protect its citizens.
Huh. Have you ever tried to go to the AG's business? There's a section where you can go if you have a complaint about a business, and they're supposed to, I forget what the name of it is, and they're supposed to look into that business.
Contact Alton Doyle, who is the chief criminal division for the state of Vermont, the Attorney General's office. They said someone would get back to me. Never did.
Huh.
Then a meeting was set up between Mike Snyder and the Attorney General, Donovan. They went out. They talked. Mr. Snyder said that they had a great talk. He brought him to 2 different parcels of land. He shared the experience of what good farm management can be,
Right.
gave him examples, told him about my case. I have yet to hear a word back from him. The only thing I do hear is he ensured that the loggers get workman's comp. But he isn't protecting the citizens of
Right.
Vermont. That's a flagrant violation of his oath to protect the citizens of Vermont.
Interesting. Very interesting, Michael. So what are you doing with this recommendation? You've talked to 2 legislators. Are you bringing this to their attention and maybe getting somebody to sponsor a bill?
I have brought it to a number of representatives, Janet Ansel, Mariana Gramage, Senator Ann Cummings, Senator Polina. They are cognizant of what's doing. In fact, Senator Cummings said that she was passing it on to Mark McDonald.
Oh,
Never heard back from
excellent.
him. Everyone seems to say and openly state the fact is in lax enforcement. All 4 of those legislators I told you, in their emails back to me, have come right out and said that the reason we're here is because of lax enforcement.
But it sounds to me that it's not the enforcement, it's the laws that are not in place that they can enforce.
Well, I think it's a case of both.
Okay.
I think it's a case of both. And it's in the judicial system itself. The courts are obviously cognizant of the fact that these repeated people are coming back to court multiple times for logging infraction, not logging necessarily, defrauding or theft or whatnot, or breach of contract, as they say. Repeat offenders keep coming back and back, yet nothing is done about that. That should send red flags everywhere
Right.
that you're not protecting your citizens. If you were, something would be happening.
Because trees are really vital to Vermont and
They are.
who we
With
are.
all this carbon tax stuff,
Yep.
you would think they'd be out there. I mean, how can this happen when the most valued thing in the state of Vermont,
Exactly.
the reason we have the least amount of emissions, is because we have such a great forest.
Right,
And
exactly.
it's managed well.
Right. But there, and as we said before, there's a lot of legislation around the 40-acre cutting.
Yes, in
Correct?
fact,
Right.
Environmental Conversations Enforcement Division can only act on parcels of violations of
40 or
40
more.
acres or more,
Right.
or violations of the AMP. The problems that happen between landowners, mills,
And
everything outside the scope of those two different things are put on the burden of the landowner. Here's one thing you might be interested to know. If a violation of the AMP happens on your property and they can't get the logger to pay for it, you become indebted to repairing your own property on top of the fact that you
Whoa.
probably didn't get paid. So you have just incurred insult to injury because the state of Vermont isn't willing to protect its citizens.
and that could cost beaucoup bucks.
It not only, yes, it does, because then that is levied onto the citizen who is probably not cognizant of the fact when that logger comes in that if there is a violation, that's going to end up in his seat.
This has to be fixed, Michael.
It does. And it's been going on for 15, 20 years.
Well, after you leave here, you got to go to those legislators. I know a couple of them, but I'd be curious to hear what they have to say.
Last night I talked to Christopher Bray.
Yeah.
He was at the Sportsman's Caucus at the State House.
Right.
He was cognizant of the fact that there were bad actors out there. He knew that there was a need. He listened very attentively to what I've said. He showed concerned interest for what I had to say, and he asked for documentation, and I provided him this last night with the brief background.
Good.
I can't actually say brief because I tend to talk a lot. I did provide him with my proposals for new legislation, my logger's friend or foe letter, which was sent to the Attorney General's office and all the different legislators that would listen to me, and my copy of what was going to happen here tonight.
That's great. That's great. So you also have, I thought that letter that you, was it your letter that said friend or foe? Was that something you wrote?
Yeah.
'Cause that was interesting.
Yeah, that is in great detail, and it substantiates my claims on the number of victims that have been taken as a consequence of failing to protect the citizens of Vermont, either in the judiciary end, the court end, or the legislative, the actual divisions in state government.
That's great. Can people get a copy of this somewhere? Because that's a good
The
document
ones,
too.
I can't, they could probably get a copy of this, but it lists the names, the actual names of the defendants.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want to put this out at this time.
Right.
I'm waiting for action to be taken. They can expose the people.
Yeah.
I just soon not say that
Yeah,
now.
no, I'm
Protect
right
you,
with you. I'm right with
protect myself.
you. Yeah, exactly.
The listing of the 20 different people that have been victimized are there.
Yeah, right.
And not only are they there, the amounts that they were victimized for, the telephone numbers, their address, what court action was taken, what docket number.
Right. Yeah.
They have the information to investigate it. And I was told that their one of their chief enforcement officers' deputies was going to investigate this and get back to you. I have yet to hear anything, and that went out in August, I believe.
You also were asking, which you and I talked a little bit, that this may not happen, but some additional officers out really investigating.
Yes.
I can't honestly imagine in this day and age that they would add, but
Foresters are not versed in enforcement.
Yep.
They don't have the background. They don't carry weapons. And they shouldn't have to be put in such a situation that they're afraid for bodily injury either to themselves or their family as a consequence of upholding Vermont's regulations.
Right.
And what I want propose is a new enforcement division. And I've brought this to the attention of people that will listen to me, maybe not necessarily do what I've said, but New Hampshire has specifically told me through their enforcement division, I can't remember the gentleman's name, I've probably got to hear someplace, that if Vermont would institute legislation or move on helping its citizens, that New Hampshire would join in and help Vermont solve this problem.
Wow.
That was the Northern Region's supervisor.
There you go.
And yet Vermont has still failed to do anything. So it's I don't want to say a bogus lie, but it's a case of looking for public opinion and all the other things that they do, but something that has gone on unchallenged for years
Right.
still goes on, and it's punishing the citizens of Vermont. And like you said, veterans and senior citizens seem to be
Right.
the ones that are carrying the blunt of this.
Well, you always hear about farmers in particular, that land is their retirement, the land and the house, and so if they're not getting compensated for...
It's their nest egg. A lot
Right.
of people have not harvested their wood products, waiting for the forest to fully mature,
Right.
so that they'll get the top dollar, and they may not have had the best 401k plans
sure.
or whatever
Right.
all those different things are. And they were kind of basing the fact that they would be able to really lay back and use the monies that they would get from this, not realizing that not only these two particular families are taking advantage of people, but there's many others that I don't know about. I have just stumbled on the 20 that I have. Imagine how many more there out there.
Right. Do you think these people would feel comfortable coming forward as a group? I mean, maybe, I'm trying to figure out why the state hasn't done, I mean, changing legislation
What is the
is
group?
not that...
You mean the landowners?
The landowners who have been...
I have the names of the ones that want to come in and testify.
Good. Because I think if you came in as a group, they might pay
I
attention.
proposed that on the last meeting that I had with Mike Snyder and his staff, and that didn't come about. The only people that were there was the representatives for the state of Vermont.
Oh.
Now, that would have been extremely good to put a face to a name,
Right.
and actually sue the victims that are
Right.
a consequence.
Regular folk from Vermont.
That's it. Everyday folks that traditionally support Vermont and its values are being denied protection under the Vermont statutes and or the Vermont legislature or anyone that
Right.
purports to defend its citizens. It's not happening.
It'd be interesting to see in the legislature who has forestry background as a legislator who might really relate to what you're talking about. Because I'm trying to remember, he may not be in the legislature anymore, but there was, when I was there was one or two people who had that was their background, and they talked trees all the time, which was cool.
Well, you know, that's the same thing as the agriculture. Used to be a lot of farmers were
Yeah,
on
now
there,
they're
but
not
you
at
know,
all.
the way that Vermont's running, it's pushing all these farms out of Vermont.
Yeah.
You know, and they wonder why there's not the farmers.
I don't
used
think
to
that
be.
people realize how much, when there's a farmer in the legislature, what they add to the conversation
That's just
is
it.
just immeasurable.
Yeah, that's just it. Too many people in high positions have no background in what's actually happening in Vermont. If I go down that road, I'm going to be spouting for hours, and I'm going to actually probably make a lot of people mad.
Well,
So
let's move on.
we'll come back to this.
Let's move on. So did you have a document that you wanted to review with our listeners, or is that the regulations that you were talking about before?
Well, actually, I think I was finishing up on this.
Oh, okay.
I mentioned
wanna
the
make
state
sure
of
we
Vermont
covered
and
it.
Maine would be instrumental in helping Vermont institute new laws and manifest to ensure proper judicial clarity, etc. They have their own enforcement divisions, and they still have problems. It's just like anything. There's going to be bad actors out there, but they have an actual group of individuals with the background that go about enforcing their
That's
laws
great.
and regulations.
Right.
So it has curbed the egregious takings on their citizens.
Excellent.
The next thing that comes up that's really interesting is the transportation of stolen wood products across state lines. Now, I was told that it was a breach of contract only on my particular case and a few of the others. But the point is, if something is stolen and you never receive compensation, I don't see that as a violation of the contract.
That's theft.
That is outright theft.
Right.
It's defrauding. And in that particular woman's case, and I'm not sure, the only reason I can't say for sure if she was completely defrauded is she wasn't provided with meal slips or trip tickets when those products left her property. So she doesn't know where those left. But I can just about guarantee you that the people that took my logs to the different mills brought them to the same mills, because why would they change?
Yeah, right.
Things changed after I started intervening.
Right.
But if so that's the case, and she never was paid anything, and they went beyond the limits of the trees that were flagged by the forester and took trees outside the scope of the contract, then it does violate interstate theft.
Because I bet sometimes they must go over the boundary line and go into your neighbor. Because I'm just thinking of, we have 24 acres, and I've tried so many times over the years to walk
The boundary
the
line.
boundary lines. I get back there, so wonder I haven't gotten lost.
You are encouraged as a landowner to walk the boundary lines with the people who are going to do the logging and mark the lines so that there's no infractions.
Yeah.
I know one case of a person bought a property, was out of state, came back to go onto his property, and there was a 3-acre clear cut.
Whoa. That'd wake you up. Where
Yeah.
are my trees?
And that's all I'm going to say about that
Yeah.
one. One thing I found interesting that Gary Kessler said, that he says, they're not loggers. He said, they are outright criminals. And he was quite upset with the judicial system that he couldn't find a prosecutor
Right.
that would champion the protection of citizens of Vermont,
Right.
and hid behind the fact that it was a contract and not a criminal event.
Yeah, well, there was some stuff I read that talked about what you really had to have in that contract to at least give it a little teeth that you could, fall back on.
Well, that's just it. Even if there was the most ironclad contract there was, if you go to court and the court finds through your discovery,
Right.
they don't do it, you find out that they have no assets that you
right,
can
sure.
attach,
Right.
then they're let off free. There's no repercussions. It's a case of, he's got no money,
Right.
he's got no assets, what do you expect us to do? My suggestion is you take the equipment that they're using for that business, because they shouldn't be in that business,
Right.
and you put them out of business.
There you go.
If they're moving in a practice and patterns like form, going from one victim to the other, then don't you see that as the logical solution to that?
Right.
If that's how you stop them. My last, I don't know how much time you got
We've
left.
got some time. Go ahead.
Okay, one thing that I wanted people to keep in mind is the state requires used cars dealers to be bonded and insurers to operate their business. Daily records are scrutinized as well, not to mention the documentation of Vermont state inspections. That was quite, when I was at the station, I ran a station on Berlin Street, and I did inspections in used car dealership. There was quite a bit of paperwork that came down. You could be visited any day by an inspection officer to check your records, to ensure the fact that you were applying and adhering to the regulations that the Vermont state had set up. It was quite an infringement upon ourselves, because we were quite often required to buy new inspection equipment to be able to adhere to the state's qualification on tolerance for different things. So it was quite an outlay. Plus, you had the bonding, you had the insurance, and the insurance was relative to how many used car dealer plates you had, and plus your insurance went up considerably because you were allowing customers to take your cars out. But the point that I'm trying to make was the state of Vermont didn't find that was a problem to incur all this extra paperwork on us to protect the citizens of Vermont, either as a used car dealer or as an inspection officer. But all of a sudden, it becomes a problem when a logger has to do that.
Interesting. You're making me feel
It's a
bad since I
double
was from
standard.
DMV.
It's a double standard.
That's interesting. Well, what is your next plan? What are you going to do?
Well,
Because it's a little late in this.
and it's only a little late because the people that I went to for help did not do anything to actually move a bill through that would have actually protected the citizens of Vermont. And they've had more than ample time to have put it on this year's docket, so it would have been there in place to prevent future people from being taken advantage of.
Well, I found in one bill that we were tracking this year that if you start, instead of giving them 2 pages of legislation, if you pick a couple of things that would get the ball rolling and get that through, you've had the discussion, so it's not going to be a new discussion with them next year when you try to add some more stuff on, and do it in incremental steps.
I agree with you completely on that, Pat. And you would think, since I've been doing this since I think it was January or early February that we filed, and I started action of going to the state police and all
Right,
those,
right.
and then contacting the Attorney General's office, who did not inform me that they had a criminal division.
Oh, sure.
They ran me through the gauntlet of being something that could be solved through their action or court action, only to find out that that's a misrepresentation of justice, because they knew quite well that there wouldn't be any restitution or criminal offenses taken against these. And just through talking to a former worker for the Attorney General's office who referred me to Alton Doyle, did I find out, or was made reference to the fact that they had a criminal division who still has yet to act on it. And that started in August, that they were made cognizant of this, yet there has been no feedback to me other than the Commissioner of Forest Parks saying that he had met with the Attorney Generals and they had a good time.
Yeah.
But that good time does not protect the citizens of Vermont.
Right, right. Got your work cut out for you.
No, actually, I think anybody hearing this has their work cut out for them. Anybody that's a responsible legislator or a representative of the judicial system, it's up to them to champion my cause and the cause for all those already injured and future victims of the state of Vermont. That's who this is sitting on. That's whose shoulders it should be on, not me, the innocent citizen. You are here to protect me, not me protect you.
Great way to end the show, Michael. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You've certainly opened up a door.
I hope
Thank
so.
you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week, and in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.